The electric revolution. Is the ban on combustion engines the undoing of the European car industry? The automotive industry stands at a crossroads as governments across the globe push for greener alternatives to combat climate change. The United Kingdom and Europe are spearheading this movement with plans to ban the sale of new combustion engine vehicles in the coming years. While this shift towards electric mobility is being touted as the solution for the automotive industry and environmental sustainability, it raises critical questions about the future of the European car industry, which has long been synonymous with mechanical engineering and combustion engine mastery.
So, as stated on the intro, the automotive industry does stand at a bit of a crossroads. This is a massive shift. This is one of those momentous occasions. Nice E92 M3 there. So yeah, this is one of those big occasions. Today's going to be a bit of a talking point because I was listening to a Collecting Cars podcast recently, and Chris Harris made the point when they were talking about Tesla and electric cars in general, that does the European car industry, do the European governments, does the UK government quite realise how significant the changes that they're imposing are going to be, and this video isn't going to be a debate about whether or not it's the right thing to march towards a completely electrified future, because obviously there are strides that have got to be taken towards a cleaner, more sustainable environment. But that's another debate in its entirety. The only thing you can say that definitely will be the case if you make all cars electric propulsion is that you will take the emissions that are generated by cars out from where they are being used. It should clean up cities, the air in cities and things like that. But one of the things that does annoy me is when people call them zero-emission cars, when governments call them zero-emission cars. There's no such thing as a zero-emission cars. You're just moving the emissions to a different part of the sort of chain, of the industrial chain, really. Energy has to come from somewhere, and currently energy doesn't come completely free. Even if you're got a very good renewable infrastructure, you're moving the emissions. But as I say, that's kind of a side debate that perhaps we could delve into in another video. But I just wanted to get sort of your thoughts as well, and spark a bit of debate about this, because it is what's going to happen at present. This is the way it very much looks set to be. The UK government have stepped back a little bit. Big tractor, on our proposed deadlines for the introduction of EVs. No, it's not the introduction, for the introduction of the legislation that you can only sell electric vehicles as a new car. But I'm not sure that the European car industry, as it stands, when you think, I know it's this is a global factor, but we're talking today mostly about Europe and the UK because obviously it's where I'm from and what I know most about. But when you think of the massive OEMs across Europe, you think of BMW, Mercedes, Audi, the VW group as a whole. There's obviously Jaguar Land Rover. And you think of the massive, infrastructure and logistics behind these companies and the supply chains that are involved in it, all the different manufacturers of different components that come into play for this kind of industry, building combustion cars and the volumes that they currently shift, the showrooms around the globe, but certainly across Europe, the service centres full of people that can fix cars with combustion engines, people that companies that make money off of changing clutches and spark plugs and whatever else. These are currently baked into their businesses and their business models, and to completely sort of change that, well, it's not overnight, it's coming in a few years time, but completely, and once again, they're not stopping us from driving the old cars, so there's still going to be plenty of combustion driven cars on the road, at least for another 10 years after that, while people can continue to run them. But will the industries really survive in the same, kind of states they are now, and the same kind of market dominance that they enjoy today in the future. I'm just not sure that they will. Anytime there's been a massive shift, an absolute paradigm, monumental shift in an industry, there are always, casualties of this, and the mindset of, they're too big to fail is easy to fall into, but there's also the mindset of, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And when you think of Kodak, for instance, in the photography arena, and then the shift towards digital, where are Kodak today? I'm sure there are some Kodak products. Let's pull out of it. I'm sure there are some Kodak products and what have you, but they were everywhere. Massive, colossal industry, an industry titan, and where are they today? And I do wonder the same. Because of the sheer size, the vastness of some of these manufacturers and their global presence, can they really fill that all of that market, all of those different models that they currently produce, and the great variety that the combustion engines allowed them to produce? Because the combustion engine provides such a differentiator between models. You can have a diesel power or petrol powered or even a hybrid these days. But in different states of tune, different amounts of cylinders change the character of the engine, and the car dramatically changes the weight distribution of the car, the place you're going to put the engine, whether or not you're going to put it in front of the driver, behind the driver. All these different things make such a difference to the type of models, and it allows you to justify. So today we're driving an Audi TT. It's front engine, four-wheel drive, it's got a 2-litre turbocharged engine, and these core characteristics decide kind of like your fundamentals of how the car is. When you're limited to having an electric motor and a battery pack, I'm sure there are great differences. We have, for instance, things like the Rimac in existence, and then you also have things like the Tesla Model Y or the Cybertruck that's recently been launched in America. But fundamentally, the drive line, the drivetrain is the powertrain is kind of broadly similar. It's a bunch of electric motors, depending on how fast you want it to go, and a bunch of batteries, depending on how far you want it to go. There has to be great strides made in efficiency and in charging networks, in infrastructure to make this even viable, and the way that we have enough power to power all of this. So I'm not so much touching on, we can get into the emotions of things because that is obviously a dramatic change, but it's not so much what we're on about today. If you put this car's actually quite good fun. It's not so much yearning for the loss of the engine, it's more a wondering of, can the industry really survive this shockwave? And when you think about it in terms of Tesla's perspective, Tesla launched a sort of brand based around pure electric against, the current market leaders who were allowed to produce and were currently producing cars in a traditional sense, in a sense that they've built them for over 100 years for some of these manufacturers like Mercedes, for example. But Tesla had to enter their arena, and they had to offer something that couldn't charge as quickly, did offer price, in the very expensive cars, but in terms of affordability, charging was quite cheap, and there was the free charger network in the first place. So they had things to help them and to build this reputation alongside the obvious performance and acceleration and things like that can wow people. But just coming out this roundabout, a bit of juice. But yeah, but now, for the governments to turn around and say, actually, we're going to legislate that the only viable way to build a car is exactly the way Tesla are building it. The other manufacturers, whether or not they realise it or not, I'm sure they must do. They've got very clever people on board. They must realise that they're literally being legislated to only produce their vehicles in another way, in exactly Tesla's way, in EV only. Obviously, all of the leading manufacturers have their own EVs, and I'm sure they're all very good. They're pretty well reviewed and all the rest of it. But they don't have a specific charging network like the Tesla charging network. So they don't have that in their pocket. But can they really, what will differentiate them? And the biggest looming problem to all of the manufacturers, I would say including Tesla, although I think they've been able to build up such a fan base, and America is a very different market to Europe. Things just cost different there, everything's on a different scale in America, so it is a different market space. You can buy a Mustang, it's astonishing, or even a Corvette, it's astonishing how affordable versus European prices that type of vehicle is over there. But there's I'm sort of digressing a bit. The looming problem is China for the European industries, because when you're having to produce an electric motor and a battery to power your car, how are you possibly going to compete as a European manufacturer with China? Essentially, for me and for many other people, they kind of, the propulsion systems and the stats that we used to look at as a car, and I know most of the buying public aren't quite as enthused by, a lot of them don't even know what engine's in their car, but they still know if they've bought something sporty, it has an engine that roars and things like that, and they expect slightly less to the gallon, but they get more miles per mile and all the rest of it, or they buy something economical and they're happy with that. But the idea they'll go into a car retailer and they'll see the specs on offer, and you'll see, right, okay, this German manufacturer, for example, is saying that you will get 300 or 400 miles and it will do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, whatever, because they're so fast, a lot of these cars. Or even if it's just a more normal car that's doing it in sort of 7 seconds or whatever. But it's a bunch of statistics that you can then go and read at another one that's a Chinese manufacturer, and whether or not people really realise it's a Chinese manufacturer, such as MG, for example. And they'll say, well, it's doing exactly the same things by the statistics, and it's £20,000 cheaper or £10,000 cheaper or what have you. Will people really think it's worth the difference? Because no longer is there that differentiating factor. If the build quality of the Chinese cars has come on massive strides in the last sort of 15, 20 years, with this advancement of electrification, we're having more and more digitized interiors with no buttons, for example, all touchscreen and things like that, and you only need to look at your latest smartphone to know where it was built, so you know that they can build those well. So yeah, realistically, why buy a premium German manufacturer car to have a broadly similar powertrain to what you can get for cheaper, for less? What will be the answer? How will they answer that? And how will they answer the vast array of different models? I don't know. I do wonder if the ramifications for this are bigger than a lot of the governments of this European continent are quite aware of. And Chris Harris made the point, it could be possible that the legislation that the European governments and the UK government are bringing in could actually mark the downfall of the European car industry. And that's it. That's the mic drop. That could be literally the case. Obviously, we're hypothesizing, and hopefully this doesn't become the case, because there's lots of brands that a great many of us have become attached to over the years. You only got to drive on the road today. I've got a Porsche behind me, there's a Volkswagen coming towards me. They're everywhere. European cars, Peugeots, Renaults, BMW, Mercedes, all of them. Whenever there's a big shift like this, there's always an opportunity for growth for some, and people who can get on top of it. And I've seen some news of Mercedes making some really efficient electric vehicles, and saying that that's potentially the way that this will really improve, in that they can build cars that can do much more to their capacity in terms of mileage. Maybe there'll be strides made in this regard, and there's no question that some of these big OEMs like Mercedes and BMW and the VW Group can build wonderful cars, and they really do understand the emotional side of the attachment to the car industry. Back in the 1960s, Britain was the second largest car exporter in the world, second only to America, I think it was. So Britain has gone from second in the world to I don't know where, but not quite so high. Who are Rover don't even exist anymore. Never mind British Leyland or whatever else. So it's entirely possible to see a huge fall from grace like that. And Germany's a very big industrial powerhouse. So where does this go? As I say, we could talk about the excitement an engine brings, but I'm more concerned today. Just what are your thoughts? Do you think that the European car industry will survive this titanic shift? Can they really build that many cars and have the vast array of market sales that they enjoy today with electric only being permitted? Can they really differentiate that much? Just waffling on a bit, I remember back when I think it might have been the GM skateboard concept came out, and it was an electric platform with battery pack on the bottom, and the idea was that the concept was that you could change your body shell and you could have a different car at different times what you fancied, or you could sell the car in different forms quite so easily because it was quite a sort of modular build. That was the whole idea. You have this skateboard deck on the bottom with the batteries and the motors, and you put on whatever body shell you like. You want an SUV, you have an SUV. You want a sports car, you have a sports car. But now as I've got older, we've become more attached to cars in different ways and things like that, and I've become attached to different ways. And I don't know if that quite, I think a sports car needs to be more than just its body shell. If it's got the same kind of drive line to it, does that really differentiate? If it drives broadly similar to a performance SUV or whatever else, I'm not sure. So yeah, I don't know. We'll certainly miss this. We'll certainly miss an engine.
There isn't really a conclusion to draw from here. It's a discussion topic, and one that isn't centred on the pros or cons of EVs. Moreover, the effect that they will continue to have on the industry as a whole. The ban on combustion engines clearly presents both challenges and opportunities for the European car industry, and it will be very interesting to see how it all plays out. One thing I do feel certain of is that the landscape for automakers will look very different in the years to come. Thanks for watching.